Good morning. 2 Kings 20:12 to 21 is our passage for today. In this passage, we see what happened after King Hezekiah was given 15 extra years of life by God's grace, following his recovery from a deadly illness. I want to remind you that chapter 20 takes place before the death of Sennacherib, king of Assyria. So the event happened before chapter 19. One piece of evidence is found in today's passage. The king Babylon, who sent by invoice Hezekiah, is Merodach-Baladan. He was a king who was defeated by the Assyrian king, Sennacherib. This gives us two key pieces of information. First, this event took place before Sennacherib's death. Second, it happened when Babylon was still under Assyrian's influence. In the first part of the chapter 20, Hezekiah turns to God in his time of crisis when he was sick. But in today's passage, after being healed and at peace, Hezekiah turns to something else instead of relying on God. This passage shows how easily our faithfulness and consistency can weaken. It also teaches that seeking God in times of crisis may actually be safer for our spiritual life than when we are comfortable and away from God. In this moment of peace, Hezekiah is distracted by flattery from a foreign nation and forgot about God. How about you? In time of peace and comfort, are you still seeking God? Or are you like Hezekiah, being drawn away from God and toward the world? Today's passage can be divided into two main sections. The first is the visit of the Babylonian envoys. The second is the judgment pronounced on Hezekiah. The first part is the visit of the Babylonian envoys, verses 12 and 13. In verse 12, it says, "At that time." This refers to time after Hezekiah's illness, which was mentioned earlier in this chapter. The king of Babylon, Merodach-Baladan, sent the envoys with the letters and gifts to the king Hezekiah. From this, we can infer that the visit was to congratulate Hezekiah on his recovery. In verse 13, we quickly see Hezekiah's reaction. He showed the envoys everything in his treasure house, including silver, gold, and spices. He also showed them his armory, leaving nothing in his palace unrevealed. From this, we can learn three things about Hezekiah's attitude. First, he was pleased that Babylonian envoys brought him gift. Why? Because Babylon, a nation hostile to Assyria, was showing interest in Judah, offering a potential alliance. Second, he was eager to show that Judah was strong and wealthy enough to form an alliance, showing off his treasure and weapons. Third, he proudly displayed his military strength and wealth, acting rashly and foolishly. 2 Chronicles chapter 32 describes this behavior as prideful. Hezekiah's action clearly showed that he had forgotten about God. The Lord had healed him and extended his life, but Hezekiah failed to acknowledge God's role. Instead, he sought to glory himself, falling into the sin of pride. Is there any part of your life where you are taking God's grace and using it for your own glory? Second part, God's judgment pronounced on Hezekiah, verses 14 to 21. Starting in verse 14, the prophet Isaiah enters the scene. God was fully aware of what Hezekiah had done, and he sent Isaiah to confront him. This was an act of grace, much like when God sent the prophet Nathan to confront King David after his sin. Isaiah asked two questions to expose Hezekiah's pride. First, where did these men come from? Hezekiah answered, they came from distant country, from Babylon. This response shows Hezekiah's pride in being noticed by the faraway, the powerful nation. Second question, what did they see in your palace? Hezekiah admits that he shows them everything, revealing his desire to show off his strength apart from God. In verse 16, Isaiah delivers God's judgment. He tells Hezekiah to listen to the word of the Lord. First, all the treasure stored up in Judah will be carried off to Babylon. Second, some of Hezekiah's descendants will be taken as a captive to Babylon as a serve the king there. In verse 19, Hezekiah's response has been interpreted differently by many pastors, myself included. Let me summarize his response in 3 points. First, Hezekiah recognized the word of the Lord is good. This shows his acceptance of God's judgment, similar to how King David accepted God's judgment through the Nathan. This is a good response. Second, however, Hezekiah also says, "There will be peace and security in my days." This reveals a self-centered attitude. He is revealed that the disaster will not happen during his lifetime, showing selfish obedience. Third, yet, there is also an element of gratitude in Hezekiah's response. By saying that God's word is good, he recognized God's grace delaying on the judgment. Hezekiah recognizes that things could have been much worse. God could have allowed Assyria to conquer Judah immediately. His response shows that he both acknowledged God's grace and struggled with the selfishness. In verses 20 and 21, the official evaluation of Hezekiah's reign concludes the chapter. One interesting detail is that Hezekiah built a pool and tunnel to bring the water into the city, ensuring water supply even during a siege. It's likely that he even showed his tunnel to Babylonian envoys, thus revealing everything to potential enemies. Today's passage highlights a key theme in the book of Kings, idolatry. The downfall of the kings was due to the turning away from God and worshiping idols. In 2 Kings chapter 20, Hezekiah momentarily forget God when the king of Babylon sent him gifts, and his joy leads him astray. Anything that takes our focus off God can be considered idolatry. Hezekiah, once faithful during his sickness, became inconsistent when at peace. This mirrors our own lives. We often handle hardship better than blessings. Are we remaining faithful to God both in crisis and in comfort? Like Peter, who confidently declared he would never deny Jesus, only do so 3 times. Hezekiah also faltered. Both remind us of human weakness and the need for humility. Rather than judging Hezekiah, we should see ourselves in his story. To stay close to God, whether in difficulty or blessing, we need a daily habit of spending time in His Word and seeking for Him. In the end, true faithfulness to God is shown not just in the time of crisis, but in the consistently seeking Him every day, regardless of our circumstances.